Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would review maybe a video or two by our good friends Dante's Boxing Nation, maybe even by AKHi TV. Excuse me. Of course, for those of you that do not know the news, Canelo Alvarez, he ended up recently unifying the complete 168-pound division yesterday, overall by beating Caleb Plant. Now, I believe that he has every single title there. Caleb Plant had the IBF title when it came down to it, and Canelo Alvarez, he basically was able to pretty much outwork Caleb Plant and eventually was able to stop him. It certainly was a very decent performance by Canelo Alvarez. I think that this was one of his better performances, especially against a slicker fighter. Now, in my opinion, Caleb Plant, of course, he's not necessarily on the level of a Floyd Mayweather Jr., and I don't even know if I would put him necessarily on the same level as an Araceli Lara. But Caleb Plant is a decently slick fighter. He certainly is an A-grade fighter. Very talented fighter when it comes down to it. And I think all in all that Canelo, that he did have a little bit of a problem with him in the first half of the fight within the first 4 rounds. But pretty much every round after round 4, I pretty much for sure gave to Canelo Alvarez. I already said this. The first round I gave to Caleb Plant. The second round I gave to Canelo Alvarez. The third and fourth rounds, although I remember them being decently competitive, I'm pretty sure I gave both of those rounds to Caleb Plant. But every round after that, I pretty much gave to Canelo Alvarez. He pretty much was chasing him down. He was cutting off the ring very decently well. Caleb Plant, he's a decently slick fighter, but I think that he was staying in the corners a little bit too much. A lot of fighters, when they have that defensive style, sometimes they don't know to move off the ropes constantly and try to get the hell out of the corner. Some fighters don't know how to get out of the corner very well. Caleb Plant, when he was tying up Canelo Alvarez, I don't think all in all that he was doing a very good job, but it is what it is. Either way, Canelo Alvarez, once again, was able to completely outperform, in my opinion, another A-grade opponent. I thought that he did a very, very good job. And Caleb Plant, like I said, in my opinion, Caleb Plant or Demetrius Andrade is probably the biggest threat to Canelo Alvarez when we talk about these fighters within the 160 and 168-pound divisions. Now, if we're talking about a legitimate threat overall that could actually potentially maybe be a 50-50 opponent with Canelo Alvarez, there's only one opponent that I really possibly see at that point in time, with this point in time. That would be Artur Beterbiev. That would be the only one. Because Artur Beterbiev, he's not really someone that I would classify as, say, a slick boxer. He's not someone overall that I would say is the most defensively responsible, but he is a person that can make adjustments, and his power is on a whole nother level, possibly even more powerful than what Gennady Golovkin was. And I think Canelo Alvarez, there is a possible chance that he knows that. That's why he was talking about possibly bringing Artur Beterbiev a little bit down in terms of weight. A little bit of a weight drain, which, it is what it is. That happens sometimes in big fights. It is, it's whatever. But when it comes down to it, Dante's Boxing Nation, he's going to be talking about the fight review and what he thought on it. And what you come to find out about most people, especially in boxing, is that they're not really too smart. They're not usually too intelligent. And most people really don't know the difference between their delusions overall and reality. And most people are heavily deluded when it comes down to it, especially when it comes to the sport of boxing. Now, there's going to be some people overall that say that, there's a possibility that Dante does not truly believe in what he's saying. Maybe. But I think that there is a part of him that does believe in some of the stuff that he is saying. I just don't think that Dante is too overly intelligent. But it is what it is. Anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what he has to say. And let's overall break it down.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Canelo Alvarez, he gets the knockout in the 11th round against Caleb Plant. If you guys go back and watch my little prediction video I made, I predicted that Canelo would stop Caleb Plant anywhere from 8 to 11. I told you guys this fight will play out the way the majority of Canelo Alvarez fight.
I think all in all that I predicted that Caleb Plant would be knocked out within about 9 to 10 rounds. So I was pretty much right on this when it came down to it overall. I was pretty much, pretty decently on the money for this fight. Of course, 1 round off, but, around there.
It's play out where Canelo is getting outboxed easily, and then as he picks it up, his opponents, they start to slow down, and he gets them out of there because they are not on.
Dante tries to spread this narrative that Canelo Alvarez, that all in all, that he just gets outboxed easily by almost every slick opponent that he faces within the first half of the fight, and then he just picks up the pace, and then eventually they get completely wore down. That's not what happens. Now, do I think in the first half of the fight that Caleb Plant was giving Canelo Alvarez some problems? Yes, but it's not like Canelo Alvarez was getting completely embarrassed. Like this dude overall acts like he's some like Deontay Wilder or something like that. Like, come on.
His level. The opponents that he's facing right now are not on his level. So Canelo Alvarez has once again proven that he is.
I've already said this. There is no opponent out there that is on Canelo Alvarez's level. None. There is no opponent overall that he could face in the near future that, in my opinion, would be on his same level. Demetrius Andrade is not on his level. You know, Caleb Plant is not on his level. Billy Joe Saunders is not on his level. Jermall Charlo, David Benavidez, they're not on his level. The only fighter, once again, that I may give a 50% chance to Canelo Alvarez, against Canelo Alvarez, would be a fully rehydrated Archer Beterbiev. That would be the only fighter, because his power is on a whole nother level.
Pound for pound, the best fighter in the world against white/European fighters. Now it's time for Canelo Alvarez to try to prove that he's the best fighter in the world. That means taking on everyone, no matter what their race, nationality is. Canelo has recently said he's not going to fight Mexican fighters anymore. So that means he's not fighting against David Benavidez, who has always been the best and the most dangerous fighter at 168.
This is the same dude that loves to claim that Terrence Crawford is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter. When Terrence Crawford, debatably his biggest win is over a Caucasian fighter who really ain't even that great, in Victor Postal. Like, Caleb Plant, in my opinion, hands down, is a better fighter than what Victor Postal was. He's way more talented than what Victor Postal was. You know, it is what it is.
White/European fighters that Canelo Alvarez has faced at 168, they don't have any power to get Canelo's respect. David Benavidez does have that power.
No, he doesn't. And a certain amount of people are going to disagree with me on this. I've already told people this once again, man. You know, I always get certain people that come on my channel and they may say, "Oh, well, let me correct you. Let me say this. Let me say that." There's no need to correct me because once again, I know what the hell I'm talking about. It is what it is. David Benavidez is not going to beat Canelo Alvarez. If I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong. I don't see it personally happening. And the reason why that is because David Benavidez, he's just way too hittable. He's going to go in there straight forward against Canelo Alvarez. I think he's going to try to out-jab him, which I don't think all in all is going to work very well. And on top of that, I think all in all that he's going to try to go to the body. I think that he's going to try to pressure Canelo Alvarez and beat him up against the ropes. And I'm sorry, but unless you're a person that has Gennady Golovkin type of power and also an A-grade skill set like a Gennady Golovkin had, you're not going to give Canelo Alvarez that hard of a fight. I'm sorry. But David Benavidez, he does not have the chin that Gennady Golovkin had. He doesn't have anywhere near the power or the skill set that a prime Gennady Golovkin had. Gennady Golovkin had one of the best jabs that I personally had ever seen, at least when it came to a middleweight fighter. Once again, a lot of people, you know, they're claiming this narrative that Gennady Golovkin was super duper overrated and all sort of stuff. Obviously, Gennady Golovkin, of course, did not have the best of resumes, but he beat basically who they put in front of him. It is what it is. Gennady was a very special fighter, and that's why in recent years, he's the one that's been the closest to possibly defeating a Canelo Alvarez, because that's how special Gennady Golovkin was. You know, these boys like Caleb Plant and Jermall Charlo and Demetrius Andrade, oh, they're good fighters, don't get me wrong, they're great fighters, but they're not on that same level that Gennady Golovkin was.
So it makes more sense for him to go after the lineal champion and really prove that he's the best at 168. So, you know, without him fighting David Benavidez, we can't even really say he's the best at 168. We can say he's the most accomplished at 168, but that doesn't tell us he's the best, because David Benavidez has the power to match Canelo's power. And he has the youth.
No, he doesn't. I don't know where this narrative is coming from. David Benavidez does not have a great power. Don't get me wrong, he has decent power. You know, there was so many people overall that, you know, Canelo detractors that I've seen where they said, and once again, I'm not a Canelo Alvarez fan. I'm not a Canelo Alvarez super fan. But I am a person that looks at things realistically. I've always prided myself overall in a realistic scope because I know all in all that I look at things in a logical and objective and realistic scope. And most people don't have that type of scope. It is what it is. David Benavidez, people love to bitch and moan and say, oh, well, who did Caleb Plant really face? Let's be real about David Benavidez here for a second, folks. Who the hell has David Benavidez really ever beat that we can say, oh my God, you know, that win that he has in his career, it really is A grade. Let's be real. That win that Caleb Plant had over Jose Uzcategui was a bigger win at that point in time than David Benavidez has had throughout his whole entire career. Let's be real. Who has he beat? The best win to this day I can think of, I believe, is Anthony Durrell, who was completely washed up by the time that you beat him. So, I mean, come on. What are we really talking about here? Who the hell has David Benavidez really beat?
As the whole
And
pack.
don't get me wrong, that's not me saying that he's not an A-class fighter. All that's me saying is that I don't know why so many people think that David Benavidez is so much more impressive than a Billy Joe Saunders or all in all, say, a Caleb Plant. Because in my opinion, both of those fights are more tough fights for Canelo Alvarez than what a David Benavidez is. David Benavidez is talented in certain ways. He's physically gifted. He's very decently fast. He's got decent power, but he does not have A-grade power. I never knew where the hell this assumption came in at. Or if he does have A-grade power, it's A- power. If you're going to hurt Canelo, not only do you have to be very defensively responsible, at least to a certain degree when it comes down to it, and not only do you have to have a great jab and decent power like Gennady Golovkin and a decent skill set, but when it comes down to it, David Benavidez, I just don't see how the hell he's going to beat Canelo. I just don't see it. He's way too hittable. He's way too straightforward. He does not have a great head movement when it comes down to it. He can be hurt. He does not have, I'm not saying that he has a bad chin, but I've seen him knocked down before. I believe by a couple of fighters. He can be hurt. I don't understand this narrative that David Benavidez would be the biggest challenge for Canelo out there. In my opinion, if we're talking about the 160 and 168 pound divisions, the only other fighter that I may even give a slight chance to at this point in time would be Demetrius Boo Boo Andre, just because of his style. David Benavidez, he's tough, he's talented, he's a different type of style, but he's not going to beat Canelo.
It's a 50-50 fight. I don't know who will win the fight, but it would be a real fight, and that's what we want to see. We don't really see Canelo Alvarez in real fights anymore since he fought against Mayweather and Adesanya.
Bullshit. Canelo Alvarez against Billy Joe Saunders, Sergey Kovalev, Callum Smith, and recently against Caleb Plant. All those guys are real fighters. I've already said this. If Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andre had beaten those guys, he would be basically saying, oh my God, look at the fighters that they beat. Because once again, Terrence Crawford, he beats Victor Postal. Terrence Crawford beats Aegis Kavaliauskas. These Caucasian fighters that have not done much in their whole entire damn career. You know, Aegis Kavaliauskas, who never was even a champion. And, Dante tries to, it's like, man, that Terrence Crawford, he's a bad motherfucker right there. Like, come on, man. Like, I'm sorry, but Terrence, he's defeating nobodies. Now, this next fight against Sean Porter is great, but who has he really beat? That's why I can't take Dante seriously, because he's just so delusional. And like I said, I'm not sure if he completely believes in all the stuff that he says, but I do believe that he believes in some of it.
Lara and Gennady Golovkin. And we know that when he fought those guys, those fights did not look like the Caleb Plant fight. So it's time for Canelo Alvarez to start stepping up in competition and fighting the best regardless of what their race or nationality is. So now that he has completely dominated all of the white champions at 168, I think it would be smart for him to go after Jermall Charlo next, especially considering...
Yes, and you're not going to give him credit for defeating Jermall Charlo anyway, which is exactly what's going to happen, because Jermall Charlo, unless Canelo Alvarez does not take him seriously, and I highly doubt that because Canelo takes every single one of his fights very seriously, Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, is going to put a majorly bad whooping on Jermall Charlo. He may last the entire fight, but we'll see what happens. Now, Jermall, he has actually the best power. He's someone actually that has A-grade power. But you can't beat a fighter just because you have A-grade power. You also have to have the boxing skills combined with that. And Jermall Charlo, he's a decently skilled boxer, don't get me wrong, but like I said, he reminds me of a bigger version of Danny Garcia. And I just don't see that beating Canelo Alvarez.
Jermall Charlo's performance that he had in his last outing. It was his worst performance ever, and this is usually when Canelo goes after...
No, his worst performance ever was against Matt Korobov or Austin Trout.
Opponents that are undefeated or have some type of buzz on their name. Even though the win would have been bigger if Canelo would have beat Charlo 3, 4, 5 years ago, but it's still going to be a huge win because Charlo is undefeated right now. And like I said,
Dante, he's already basically playing the excuse card. If Canelo Alvarez beats Jermall Charlo to death, which is more than likely what's going to happen, all he's going to say is that Jermall Charlo was not the same fighter, or that he fought him off of a very unimpressive performance. So Dante, he's not going to give Canelo Alvarez any credit anytime soon, just like he didn't give Tyson Fury any credit. Overall, just like he didn't give Gennady Golovkin any type of credit, and he didn't like to give Vasyl Lomachenko a lot of credit either.
It would make way more sense for Canelo to be the first person to beat him after...
But Gervonta Tank Davis, he can take on these bullshit fights against Rolly Romero, who's a complete bum when it comes down to it. And all in all, he gets all the credit in the world. Or Terrence Crawford, he faces the majority of his career C and B class fighters, and he's allegedly the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Like, come on.
Charlo has been calling him out for so long, as opposed to Canelo allowing someone else to be the first person to beat Charlo. So I believe there's a very good chance we will get the Charlo fight next. It's hard for me to believe that he's going to go up to 175 and fight Beterbiev or Bivol, because like I said, then he would be dealing with real adversity. If Canelo goes up to 175...
Bivol and Beterbiev, those are the only two boxers, in my opinion, really within that whole entire scope, at least a fight that would be realistic for Canelo. Those are the only two that, in my opinion, have a legitimate chance of possibly defeating a Canelo Alvarez. Andrade, I don't think, has a very high chance. I don't think Benavidez does either. I don't think Charlo does either. Like I said, all those boxers to me, they're pretty much on the same level. They're all A-grade fighters, but none of them are A+. It is what it is.
That would be equivalent.
Artur Beterbiev, in my opinion, he's certainly debatably an A+ fighter.
So Floyd Mayweather fighting at welterweight. And it's funny because you fans keep saying that Canelo is just doing the same things that Floyd Mayweather did. Well, this would be his opportunity to do so. I mean, he's already fought Kovalev at 175, and I think that there's certain opponents he will fight at 175. But remember, Floyd fighting...
These Floyd Mayweather Jr. nut huggers, when it comes down to it, and don't get me wrong, I like Floyd. Floyd was an all-time great fighter. In my opinion, as I've already said, in my opinion, he's debatably the greatest fighter ever, at least in terms of boxing. But when it comes down to it, all in all, so many of these guys, they love to basically say, oh, well, Canelo, he fought Sergey Kovalev when he looked at his worst. Not every single fight that Floyd Mayweather Jr. had did he fight an opponent that was just coming off of a flawless performance. Don't get me wrong, a lot of the times he was fighting guys that had their best performance. But there were certain times, like when he fought Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya was not at the best point in his career. A lot of people don't mention that. When he beat Oscar, Oscar was pretty much done. A lot of people overall don't mention that. Oscar, I'm not going to say that he was completely done, but Oscar, at that point in time when Floyd beat him, Oscar was more unimpressive at that point in time in his career than what Sergey Kovalev was. And those are just the facts.
At 147, everyone he fought was bigger than him. The majority of people he fought was 15 to 20 pounds bigger than him, right? They all had more...
No, they were not. No, they were not. This bullshit lie has to stop. No, they were not. The majority of the opponents that he fought were not 15 to 20 pounds bigger than him. That is a bullshit lie. Don't get me wrong. Mayweather fought fighters a lot of the times that were bigger than him. But this 15 pounds to 20 pound bullshit, that never happened usually. Don't get me wrong. There was a couple of opponents that were around that size against Floyd Mayweather Jr. Like when you talk about someone like a Victor Ortiz, he rehydrated, I believe, about 20 pounds heavier than Floyd Mayweather Jr. Oscar De La Hoya, I believe, did as well. But when you talk about Miguel Cotto, Marcos Maidana, Shane Mosley, Manny Pacquiao, Ricky Hatton, none of these fighters rehydrated 15 to 20 pounds heavier than Floyd Mayweather. Just stop it.
More power than him. It wasn't like when Floyd Mayweather was at 130.
Now, if you want to say that a lot of these fighters have more power than him, that would be fair. Like Shane Mosley and Canelo and Oscar and Miguel Cotto, possibly even Ricky Hatton. You can mention that.
135, where the power was more equal. Floyd was knocking out a lot of guys when he was at 130 and 135. This would be the situation that Canelo would be in at 175, where he's dealing with guys that have a lot of power. Some of them may even have more power than he does. Some of them may be naturally bigger than he is.
I would agree. I'm not sure if Dimitri Bivol, I'm not sure if he would have 100% more natural power than Canelo. He looks like he's in a type of fighting style right now that, in my opinion, I'm not sure if he can beat Canelo right now. Artur Beterbiev, he didn't look overly impressive in his last fight, but I'll give him a little bit of a break because I think he was coming off of a decently long layoff. And on top of that, Artur Beterbiev, that dude can punch. Like, that dude, understandably, he's bigger than Gennady Golovkin. I think that Artur Beterbiev is even a more natural, stronger puncher than a prime Sergey Kovalev or a prime Gennady Golovkin.
Right? So we'll really see a lot of adversity if he...
I've seen Artur Beterbiev completely break down Gvozdyk. And Gvozdyk, he was able to break down Adonis Stevenson and knock him out and put him into a coma. And that's with taking a couple of flushed left hands from Adonis Stevenson. Adonis Stevenson, by the way, for those of you that don't remember, one of the best and greatest punchers of this past era. And Gvozdyk was able to take his punches, but when Artur Beterbiev hit him flush, now, of course, Stevenson, he was a bit older. So if someone wants to mention that, that would not be unfair. But Beterbiev, he completely wiped the floor with Gvozdyk, at least, in the latter half of the fight. Beterbiev, man, that dude's punches are no joke.
Goes up to 175. I'm talking about really campaigns there. Let's see what happens, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does take the Charlo fight. It would be a huge fight, and at least for Canelo, it would be perfect timing. So anyway, that's all I got for...
Basically, Dante's way of saying, if he beats Charlo, I'm not going to give him credit.
Now, guys, I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that's it for this little video. Let's move on to AKHi TV or someone else and see what they had to say. Okay, so this next video that we're going to review, just to make the video a little bit more interesting and lengthier, we're going to review an AKHi TV video. We're going to see overall what he has to say about this fight, and let's get into it.
Congratulations to Canelo for becoming the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world, as he scored a devastating knockout tonight against Caleb Plant.
Let me also say this undisputed title, in my opinion, now of course he didn't win the WBC belt over David Benavidez, but Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, in my opinion, those were clear A-grade fighters. They were multiple weight division champions. Could Victor Postal, if he fought in the lower weight classes, could he be a multiple weight division champion? I highly doubt it, but maybe I'm wrong about that. All right, it is what it is. Caleb Plant was a very talented champion, so was Billy Joe Saunders. Even Callum Smith. Now, Callum Smith, he's not someone that I would say necessarily has an A-grade skill set all the time, but he's a dude that has A-grade power. That's actually someone, all in all, Dante said in his last video, like Callum Smith, he said all in all that he's not fighting guys with power. Callum Smith is a dude that has real deal power. Like, that's a dude, like, if he punches you the right way, you're going to be out. Like, that dude, all in all, he could even compete at light heavyweight, which I believe he is right now. Like, these guys, they can claim that, oh, they're these Caucasian fighters. These Caucasian fighters, man, they're no joke. Or at least some of them. Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, and Billy Joe Saunders, these guys were no joke.
In the 11th round, this fight played out exactly to a T how I predicted. I told you guys Caleb Plant was going to outbox Canelo early. Then in the fourth quarter of the fight, Canelo will get him out of there in a devastating fashion, either with an overhand right or a devastating left hook, which the lunging left hook by Canelo was the one that really got the job done. Nevertheless, from the first bell, Caleb Plant came out establishing his jab.
Caleb Plant stood too still sometimes in the corner. And I knew that, I seen that he was trying to do that shoulder roll shit. All that is great, but you ain't Floyd Mayweather Jr. And once again, you got to move, man. You got to use your feet. You got to move all over the place. You got to give him different angles. You have to keep him guessing. You can't just stand in the corner and overall hope that Canelo Alvarez ain't going to hit you with something. Like, come on.
Finding the range and using the ring to his advantage. As predicted, Caleb Plant gave Canelo Alvarez a hard time early with his jab and movement. He easily won 5 out of the first 7 rounds. However, once
he easily won 5 out of the first 7 rounds. Like I said, it's a very good thing that AKHi TV or none of these other guys are professional boxing judges, because they have no idea how to score a fight. Most people, on average, don't really know how to score a fight. No, like I said, I thought Caleb Plant maybe won 3 rounds. Maybe. That was my opinion. I would give him about a good 3 rounds. But other than that, no.
they entered the later part
Like I said, after that 4th round, Canelo was taking over
the fight, Caleb Plant started to slow down, while Canelo Alvarez came on stronger. Even then, Caleb Plant managed to win some of the later rounds as well. But by that point...
Which one specifically? I want to know which ones. Caleb Plant in that whole entire second half of the fight, I think maybe there was one round, maybe it was round 9 or 10, where, Canelo, he was kind of laxing off, and Caleb Plant, all in all, he was kind of getting back at him. Maybe there was one latter round that he could have won. One. But no, bro. Like, AKHi TV, man, like, if you let him tell, like, Caleb Plant was, like, completely in this fight and winning this fight before Canelo stopped him. Once again, these guys have no idea how to score a boxing fight.
Canelo was breaking down Caleb Plant to the body, which eventually Caleb Plant had no steam on his punches. Caleb Plant's ultimate downfall was his inside game. Boxing Canelo is not enough. Yeah, Caleb Plant was outboxing Canelo with ease, but once Canelo closed the gap, Caleb Plant looked...
And that's the thing. I don't think that anyone, all in all, has the inside game within those divisions to compete with Canelo. People bring up David Benavidez, but David Benavidez, first of all, I don't think that he's the boxer that Canelo Alvarez is in terms of fighting on the outside. And secondly, when it comes down to it, you can try to fight Canelo on the inside, but if you're not defensively responsible, if you don't cover up, if you're a person that maybe does not have a decent chin like a Gennady Golovkin, good luck. That's all I'm going to say. There's no one that I see within those divisions that can compete with him on the inside. Maybe Andrade, maybe. But, I mean, I don't even think Andrade, like I said, I like Andrade. Andrade's a very, very decent fighter. I always get these Demetrius Andrade fanboys on my channel, and they always say, oh, what are you talking about? Look what he did in the amateurs and all this other bullshit. That's great. Does that mean that he's going to beat Canelo? Like, it is what it is. Andrade, don't get me wrong, Andrade can be very, very talented, but there's just too many performances that I've seen with him where he's just really underwhelmed. Take a look at his last fight. Now, in my opinion, I think all in all that he would probably do his best for Canelo. At least I would hope. But when it comes down to it, I just think Andrade, that he's a little bit too hittable. And his power, he doesn't have A-grade power either. The only one remaining that has A-grade power within those 160 to 168 pound divisions is Jermall Charlo. That's it. And Jermall Charlo, once again, he's like a Danny Garcia. Great power, but in terms of boxing ability, he's not going to be the same as some of those other guys.
Really uncomfortable. Like I said on my prediction video, Caleb Plant fights too much of the Philly shell. Even Floyd doesn't fight that long off the Philly shell, even though he's the master of it.
Well, you can fight in the Philly shell. That really wasn't the problem. Fighting in the Philly shell ain't really a problem. Now, of course, you need to adjust. The problem is that Caleb Plant was staying in the corner too long. And after a while, he was coming, he was repeating his patterns too much. Like I said, you can't just stand in the corner and keep your hands up overall or keep it in the Philly shell and just hope overall that Canelo Alvarez don't hit you. Caleb Plant, he was getting too repetitive after a while, which was his eventual downfall.
You see Floyd.
The difference is between Floyd Mayweather Jr. and a lot of these other guys is that Floyd Mayweather Jr. gives you different looks, and he always keeps you guessing.
Go to the high guard and give his opponents different looks. However, Caleb Plant fought off the Philly shell majority of the night. And don't get me wrong, he did a great job doing it. He was countering Canelo with right hands, so on and so forth. But at the same time, that left him vulnerable for left hooks all night, which eventually Canelo Alvarez loaded up with the left hook, where he managed to land one right on the mark as Caleb Plant was trying.
And the reason why is because Caleb Plant, once again, he was standing still in the corner. He was hoping that, Canelo, that his left hook, that I wasn't going to be able to get past his right hand. And I give Caleb Plant props. He kept his hands up more than I usually see him do it. So obviously I'm not the only one that told him that. But when it comes down to it all in all, or, said something about that. But when it comes down to it, you can't just stand in the corner and all in all, wait there for too long and just hope that Canelo ain't going to hit you. It ain't going to happen that way.
Trying to stand his ground. After that, Canelo Alvarez followed up with the right uppercut and another left hook that dropped Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant barely got up. That's when Canelo Alvarez jumped on him and got the job done. So congrats to Canelo. On the other hand, Caleb Plant, he showed a lot of heart and put on a good challenging performance against
How come our parents' generation would eat steak and potatoes, sugary sweets, smoked cigarettes, and never went to a gym a day in their lives? And yet, they were 3 times less likely to be overweight than our generation is. Meanwhile, our generation, despite
against Canelo Alvarez. Listen, he could have utilized his jab better to the body instead of just focusing solely on the head. That would have helped on keeping Canelo off of him. But the reality is, Canelo was the better man tonight. Caleb Plant had some tools, but not all of the tools necessary to beat Canelo Alvarez. That's why he was handpicked by Canelo Alvarez to be here tonight. I predicted this 2 years ago. These memes you guys seeing, these were made 2 years ago. What this fight showed tonight is that Canelo Alvarez is very vulnerable. He can be outboxed. He's not that good of a boxer. Amir
Oh, man.
Khan outboxed him for 5 rounds. Lara outboxed him.
No, he didn't. Amir Khan did not outbox him for 5 rounds. Amir Khan won the first 2 rounds, and then after that, Canelo Alvarez started outboxing him. Just stop. Now, Erislandy Lara, he gave him hell, but Erislandy Lara, he gave everyone hell. Once again, Lara, in my opinion, this is my opinion about Erislandy Lara, he is the most skilled Cuban fighter to come out of the Cuban boxing school, at least that I've seen within the past 10 years. That includes even more skilled than a Guillermo Rigondeaux, and even more skilled overall than a Yuriorkis Gamboa. Gamboa, overall, he wasn't as skilled as either of them. That's why he got exposed in almost every big fight that he's been in.
Triple G outboxed him. Kovalev was outboxing him before he got stopped.
No, he wasn't.
Billy Joe Saunders was outboxing him before he
No, he wasn't.
got stopped. And so did Caleb Plant. This further proves, since Canelo lost to Floyd Mayweather, he's still the same fighter.
No, he's not the same fighter. And you can tell that he's not the same fighter. His feet are a lot better than what they used to be. His head movement is a lot better. His defense is the thing that has improved on me the most. Like I said, I am very, very impressed with Canelo Alvarez. Canelo, in my opinion, when it is all said and done, depending on what type of wins that he gets, I believe that Canelo Alvarez more than likely is probably going to be a top 20 boxer of all time, at least.
Has the same flaws. And this fight proved it. The only difference is Floyd Mayweather. Floyd didn't just outbox Canelo like Lara did. Floyd Mayweather fought Canelo. He backed up Canelo.
I agree, and you have to do that. Now, would he be able to do that today, overall, if Canelo Alvarez was completely at a full weight? I don't even think Floyd Mayweather Jr., if he was in his prime today, I don't think I'll know that he would even risk facing Canelo Alvarez. That's not me saying that Floyd would not take big fights, because he would. But there was a reason why Floyd Mayweather Jr. did not want to take on Sergio Martinez. Canelo Alvarez, really, when we talk about in terms of weight, he's a natural middleweight when it comes down to it, at least. So I think that when you talk about prime v prime, I don't think that fight would have ever happened in the first place. Now, Canelo Alvarez, he was still at a very decent peak of his career. He was still overall, at a very decent point in his career. But for me to say that Canelo Alvarez was at his absolute peak, no, I can't necessarily say that. It is what it is. Now, I still give Floyd Mayweather Jr. all the credit in the world for beating Canelo. But it is what it is. Now, do I believe that, say if they were similar in size, or let's say even Canelo was just a little bit bigger, let's say he was a natural, 154 pounder, or let's even say if Canelo was allowed to go up to 160 and Floyd fought him at his regular 147 or 150 pound weight, do I think that Floyd would still beat him? I think that there would be a very decent chance of that. But Canelo, you can tell that he is a different fighter at this point in time in his career.
in the first round, in the 7th round, and he beat Canelo at his own game, which is the reason why Canelo haven't fought an undefeated black American fighter since then, till this day. And now Canelo is officially Europe #1 pound for pound undisputed champion. If you Canelo fans disagree, then please tell me, why did Canelo fight Caleb Plant for undisputed, but he won't fight Demetrius Andrade for undisputed at 160 pounds? Why did Canelo Alvarez turn down the same amount of money to fight Demetrius Andrade for undisputed? Better yet, why he...
Well, when it comes down to it, like I said, all those guys are pretty much on the same level. You know, I don't necessarily have a problem with people saying that Canelo, that maybe he doesn't seem too interested in a Demetrius Andrade fight. But then these same guys, when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis, obviously avoiding a Vasily Lomachenko, even at this point in time, or avoiding possible other fights, they don't mention anything about it. Or Terrence Crawford saying that he's not interested in Sean Porter, or saying all in all that he's not going to sign with Showtime.
rather fight Jake Paul, but not Andrade.
Canelo, you said you'll be interested in fighting Jake Paul. Do you think Jake Paul is better than Demetrius Andrade?
No. No worse.
Who the fuck asked a question like that? Obviously that was meant to set up Canelo Alvarez. But it is what it is. But Canelo Alvarez, I do think all in all that he may be very interested in that Jake Paul fight, because I think that boxing is trying to make that fight within a couple of years. Canelo Alvarez is only about 31 years old, I believe. He's got many years left. Jake Paul, I believe he's somewhere in his 20s. I think he's about 23, 24 years old. Jake Paul is facing Tommy Fury next. I don't personally think he's going to win that fight. But if he does, that Canelo Alvarez-Jake Paul fight might be a little bit closer than what I once originally thought.
Who is better, Benavidez or Charlo in your opinion?
Both fighters are great. Both fighters are great.
I would say that both fighters are about on the same level. That's what I keep saying. Benavidez, Charlo, Andre, Caleb Plant, Saunders, all these guys come from an assembly line. They're all a little bit different in their own way, but they're all on the same level. None of those fighters, are completely over the other.
Great fighters.
But in my opinion, if you were going to ask me who do I think is better, I would go with Jermall Charlo, but, not by much.
I can pick one because they are good fighters.
How personal is this fight for you? Other than I know you want the belts.
Yeah,
this is different.
It's different.
You seem more amped up than you were when I saw you back in Dallas in May. It seemed like this, like a little bit more Viva La Raza.
But this is a little more personal because what happened in Los Angeles. But I'm good.
Do you think that's going to lead him more for a knockout because he's going to be more in front of you trying to prove and that he's not going to let you bully him?
I don't know what he's gonna do, but whatever he gonna do, just be careful.
No, would you be disappointed based on what you just said about it being personal if you did not knock him out?
No. I just wanna win. If he's knocked out, okay, it's his decision.
And I agree with that. That's what a great boxer does. You don't go looking for the knockout like a Deontay Wilder. If the knockout comes, it comes, because of course you don't want to go looking for the knockout and exhaust yourself or possibly get caught with an incoming shot. Let me also say this about Canelo Alvarez, though. If the day ever comes that he actually does get knocked out, I'm going to be pretty damn shell-shocked, because I've seen Canelo Alvarez. I've seen him take some shots by some pretty powerful punchers. This dude has one of the best chins that I've personally ever seen in boxing history. I mean, there's only been 2 times in his career, in his whole entire career, that I've ever even seen him stumbled. I mean, I've seen Floyd Mayweather Jr. hurt more often than I've seen Canelo Alvarez hurt. And that says something. Because Floyd, of course, had a great chin and, of course, was very defensively responsible.
It's boxing. At the end of the day, I'm gonna win. That's the right thing, right?
How emotional things going to be, get all those belts and what you've been working for your whole career.
You fighting at 168, undisputed at 168 this weekend. Is there a reason why you didn't go for undisputed at 154 or 160?
That's what we talking about, Eddie and me. We have a lot of opportunities to be undisputed in 154 and 160, but sometimes the promoter is difficult. It's
difficult to make.
Okay, thank you.
Eddie, do people realize that Demetrius Andrade could be the undisputed middleweight champion of the world?
They're sleeping on him. I said to Andre the other day, I said, Demetrius, you have no idea what a position you are in. You are the final piece of the undisputed puzzle. That's going to be the undisputed fight that could happen.
He is the only champion out there in the division right now, and Canelo should want to fight him. Canelo wants to fight Kovalev. There's not a lot we can do about that. I feel bad for Andre.
I hate to tell people this, but this is my opinion. Sergey Kovalev, even at that point in time in his career, in my opinion, was a bigger threat to Canelo than what Demetrius Andrade or Jermall Charlo ever would be.
Canelo doesn't want to seem to fight him. Canelo doesn't want to seem to fight him. The fight is no longer an undisputed fight because of the WBC franchise situation.
And what do you think about Jake Paul telling people that he would love to fight Canelo Alvarez in another year or two?
We'll see. You never say no, so we'll see.
William on Twitter asks, "Hey Canelo, why have you continually refused?"
These guys have a problem with Canelo wanting to fight Jake Paul, but Floyd Mayweather, he'll face Conor McGregor or Logan Paul, and they're completely okay with it.
To fight Demetrius Andrade, never at 154 or at 160, and he holds a belt. You call him boring, but you smash Billy Joe Saunders, and his style is similar.
No, he's a horrible fighter. I don't never want to fight with him.
I do think that Canelo does realize a possible threat of a Demetrius Andrade. But when it comes down, like I said, this is just my personal opinion. Demetrius Andrade, he's pretty much on that same level of other fighters. Like I said, all these guys, they're pretty much on the same level.
He fought with anybody, so.
Canelo, obviously you've been following, there's the YouTube sensation Jake Paul is out there, and he has said that he has a goal within 3 years to fight you. Do you think that could ever happen?
We don't know. You never say no, so we don't know. He can try and keep going fighting and learn, and we'll see in the future.
What does he need to do?
Putting up the fact that he's fighting in June aside, can you give me your thoughts about the possibility of it?
Now, that was a very interesting question. One of the guys said, overall, what does Demetrius Andrade need to do? In my opinion, like I said, Canelo realizes that Andrade, he could be somewhat tricky. So what Andrade needs to do, in my opinion, is that he needs to trap Canelo Alvarez in a corner. And the only way you're going to do that is facing elite opponents. I'm sorry, but I get that Demetrius Andrade, he called out Canelo Alvarez in the presser. That ain't going to work. Because no one is asking for a Demetrius Andrade versus Canelo Alvarez fight. Or I shouldn't say no one, but the majority of people aren't. Not a whole lot of boxing fans really give a shit whether Canelo Alvarez faces, Jermall Charlo or Demetrius Andrade next. They would prefer Jermall Charlo or David Benavidez next, but they really don't give a shit whether he faces Demetrius Andrade next. Unless Demetrius Andrade, like I said, he proves himself against an elite fighter. That's why, in my opinion, Demetrius Andrade, his next opponent should be David Benavidez. And he shouldn't worry about that bullshit WBO title at the middleweight division, defending it against all these bums. But it is what it is.
Fight against Demetrius Andrade and the prospect of becoming the undisputed champion.
Sí, no, el que tenga el título, eso es lo que queremos el título, y pues obviamente ese es el objetivo, ¿no? Vamos a sentarnos con nuestro equipo a ver qué es lo que viene, pero el objetivo es ganar los 4 títulos en peso medio.
Yes, that's the goal. Look, whoever has the title, doesn't matter. Our goal is to unify all the belts, become the undisputed middleweight champion of the world.
I'm with the zone, Matchroom, which Matchroom Eddie Hearns is supposed to deliver the big fights, offer Charlo $7 million to fight me.
Anyways, that's really about it for this video. But anyways, we'll see overall what happens with Mr. Canelo Alvarez next. I just thought that would be very, very interesting. I do believe personally that he is going to go after Jermall Charlo. But it should be very interesting. Anyways, we'll see what happens. I would be personally very, very excited for that fight, because that really would be the first official A-class fighter that Jermall Charlo has ever faced in his career. So we'll see all in all what happens. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.